Welcome to the Sober Living Stories podcast. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of sobriety. We shine a spotlight on individuals who have faced the challenges of alcoholism and addiction and are today living out their best lives sober. Each guest has experienced incredible transformation and are here to share their story with you. I'm Jessica Stepanovic, your host. Join me each week as guests from all walks of life share their stories to inspire and provide hope to those who need it most. Welcome to another episode of the Sober Living Stories podcast. Today, we're joined by Miriam Rachel, a mental health advocate who shares her incredible journey of overcoming emotional eating in an effort to regain control over her life. From battling people-pleasing to coping with weight struggles since adolescence, her story is one of self-discovery. She talks about facing burnout as a caregiver and breaking free from harmful habits, even during life's toughest moments. Get ready to be inspired. This is a conversation you won't want to miss. Welcome, Miriam. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on.
So glad that you could be here. It's been really prevalent lately about emotional eating and food addictions. And when I heard your story, I wanted you to come on and share your journey with that and any helpful insights on how to have a healthier relationship with food to our listeners. So if you can just start at the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. My goodness, I don't even know where to start, but I guess I'm going to start here. So I'm the oldest. And of course, my parents were harder on me, more critical of me, and then they were so easy on my brother, who is now estranged, but that's another story for another time. Okay. I was also not treated very well. I was bullied, I was scapegoated, and it's because I was always the sensitive one. I was different. I am neurodiverse, and nobody knew that at the time. So that's why my social skills were very awkward. And then as soon as I hit puberty at age 11, my weight just went up and I ended up with acne and everything. And I was shunned. I was made fun of. So I had nowhere to turn to, and I started developing very unhealthy eating habits. I was sneaking food, and as a teenager, I would steal money from my mother's purse and just go to the convenience store to get candy and stuff. So that's how it all started. But then at age 15, I knew I wanted a boyfriend, so I knew I had to lose weight. And I was put on my first diet, and I did lose quite a bit of weight. And then I was put on I think I went on like 1,000-calorie diet, which is absolutely a no-no. But then it didn't take long for me to start yo-yoing since then. And I yo-yoed and yo-yoed and yo-yoed for decades. Now, the absolute worst experience for me, very traumatic, was I have two kids. One of them has complex special needs. And you know what? As a mother, you do everything you can to help your kid, right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
But I got absolutely no support. I was shamed. Every time I vented about my struggles, I was told basically to shut up. He's autistic with severe ADHD, and it wasn't diagnosed, but he very likely has oppositional defiant disorder too. And he was very, very manipulative, and I did what I could to help, because he was very good at school, but then his therapists and teachers said, you got to practice these things at home. He did not cooperate. And it was just awful. I felt so alone. And I was always told, be thankful your son can talk. You have no business complaining. Things just got very worse. And my depression was so severe that I was just basically focusing on food, always comfort eating. I'd even get up in the middle of the night to eat. It was terrible. I was 300 pounds. That was the highest I've ever been. That was my rock bottom. Okay. So I also want to mention that because of all that and because of what I experienced in my youth, I fell into people pleasing, extreme people pleasing, known as echoism. Okay, and echoism
Okay.
is the opposite side is narcissism, right? You got to find a balance. We know narcissism is where you only care about yourself. You don't care about anyone else. You do it what's for you. Echoism, you only care about others because you want to be accepted. That's pathological people pleasing. So I fell into that until
Oh.
my catalyst was when I knew I was not able to take care of my son anymore. I was so depressed, I was almost catatonic. I
Mm.
was just barely functional. And I'm telling you, being 300 pounds is horrid, absolutely horrid.
Mm.
You forget about mentally, physically. You can't walk without getting winded. Your joints hurt all the time. Your back hurts. It's horrible. So I
Wow.
finally reached out to help. I did. And they listened to me. So he was placed in a therapeutic setting, in a group home setting, and a residential school type. And he's doing very well. This was in 2017.
Hmm.
So I actually, after that, with 4 months after decompressing, I decided I knew I had to lose that weight.
Right.
I was also having sleep apnea, which is absolutely frightening, very
Hmm.
frightening. And that's when I knew, oh my goodness, I got to change this. So I slapped myself on a 1,500 calorie diet, also probably very stupid because I was probably consuming a good 4 or 5,000 calories. And that's way too much of a deficit. I should have gone maybe to 2,500. I should have talked to a doctor or a dietitian, really. And I would have lost on 2,500 initially anyway. I mean, I really would
Mm.
have, but whatever, done is done. But it was terrible. I was shaking. I was just having the chills. It was horrid. But then I
Mm.
adapted and I lost that weight very, very quickly. This was in 2018. In 2019, I actually was doing well with maintenance. I did. And I mean, I gained a little bit of weight, but not too bad. However, when the pandemic hit, all the lockdowns happened in 2020, I ended up gaining a lot of that weight back. Not everything, but I ended up gaining a lot of that weight back. And then it's because I didn't really change my habits. I just yo-yo diet. I just went back to old habits. I was upset about the lockdowns. I was upset about, and I'm an introvert and I hated the lockdowns.
Yeah.
But I used, again, food to cope with my feelings. Um, so that's what I did. And then I didn't like the fact that I was, gaining the weight back again. And I was also yo-yoing. I was sent from
Mhm.
2021 to 2022, yo-yoed about 30 pounds here and there. So then actually what happened was in very late 2022, um, my mother had told me, she said, "Oh, I heard about an amazing drug that people are using to lose weight." And I think I know what this is, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, it's Ozempic. So then, I mean, I hadn't even had a checkup since I don't even know 2018 or
Sure.
2019 because of the lockdowns and everything. But here's the thing. I went to the doctor and I said I want to try Ozempic, and he says, "Well, we got to test your blood sugar to make sure that, if your blood sugar shows it's high, then yeah, you'll be approved because of insurance reasons, right?"
Okay.
So it's like, well, I didn't have a reason to think I was diabetic, but because I'm like, oh, well, I don't really eat too much candy anymore. I don't do this or that. Well, it doesn't matter. I turned out to be diabetic anyway, and I
Okay.
was,
Hmm.
yeah, and it's a good thing that it was caught when it was. So, yep, I got approved for
Sure.
Ozempic. And let me tell you, this was in January 2023. I've lost about 45 pounds on it. I've got about 25, 30 more to go, but whatever. I'm not even gonna focus on that too much right now. That's just part of all of this, right? So let me tell you though, let me tell you that Ozempic really changes the way you think about food.
So could you explain that a little bit to listeners who I know that's really been in the media a lot
Oh yeah.
just in the past year. And
Mhm.
so what exactly is it and what does it do and what did it cause you to do?
Yeah, okay, so it's a GLP-1 drug. Basically, it helps regulate your hunger hormones in your brain and just in your system. So you start feeling full. You actually stop thinking about food in the way that, in a more healthy way. You do. You don't mindlessly eat so much. You find other ways to cope, and that's what I did. But the thing is, not everybody's going to be able to go on that, and I'm certainly not telling people that they should, because there are side effects with it too, and some people have very bad reactions to it. I luckily didn't have anything too bad except for constipation, but
Uh-huh.
and a bit of heartburn, but it's just one of those things. And there's, you know what, there's other tools to look into as well, because it's a tool. It's not a
Mhm.
magic bullet, it's a tool. So that's what I was basically forced to focus on, find new ways to cope, because food just wasn't it. As soon as I
Wow.
started going, yep, food just wasn't it. And it's a tool. Like I said, you still have to do the work, but it's a tool. And really, there were times when I mourned. I mourned the old habits that I had. I mourned. I mean, you're going to mourn. You don't want to eat. Like, well, this is how I coped. And you got to figure out how to cope. So what's been working for me is writing. I mean, I'm a writer anyway, but
Hmm.
writing, medium.com has been a really great outlet for me. I write
Hmm.
about what I want, and journaling too. Journaling really does help. You get all your feelings out instead of stuffing them in, because
Sure.
when you're emotionally eating, you stuff your feelings in because you don't feel heard. You
Right.
don't feel, and
Well,
you're
I think,
scared. Yeah.
yeah. Well, let's just back up just a little bit. I
Hmm.
think what's important is that you're saying that that was a tool for you. It wasn't a
Hmm.
magic bullet. It's not
No.
the end all. It's not put all your. So what that essentially did for you was kind of it arrested the eating compulsion
Hmm.
and within your brain. And
Hmm.
then because that was such a numbing agent for you and for your emotions, having that be gone, it forced you to find different ways
Hmm.
to cope and to actually feel emotions. So
Hmm.
that must have been difficult. And I really
Yeah.
respect and appreciate that you talked about mourning, because I think when
Hmm.
you're in a harmful habit for however many years, that there's some kind of grieving process that goes along
Yeah.
with that. And I can relate with that so much with
Hmm.
having overcome alcoholism, because I can specifically know the day that I wrote about how that was my like companion for so many years
Hmm.
and like best friend for so many years, and how I'm saying goodbye to that. And so that's really essential. I think it's a big step in the right direction when you come to grips with that and grieve it, and because you're really letting it go. So can you tell
Yeah.
us more about the coping mechanisms and what happened like internally to you?
Yeah, okay. So it was very hard because I knew that food wasn't it. If I was feeling really, really upset and I was just wanting to go back to my old habits, but I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not even hungry. I'm not sure if I'm going to have the appetite for this.
Hmm.
So that was very hard. And that's what I also was grieving. And then I just decided, I'm going to screw it. I'm just going to write down how I feel and I'm just
That
going to
yeah,
let it all out. And that's a really good coping mechanism. I mean,
it's
writing,
great.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I love that, because
Hmm.
you took a really negative, harmful habit that was hurting you, and
Hmm.
you put it down and you replaced it with writing. Like, I'm a
Mm.
writer, I get that. Like, it's
Mm.
creative, it's an outlet. So instead of stuffing, you're letting it out, you're putting it on the page, and then that becomes something. It's like a completely different. That's incredible. I love that you journaled. I love that you're
Hmm.
saying that so listeners can know that that is a complete option. So tell me a little bit about the
Yeah.
writings.
Yes, it's okay. So this is how you do it, because you want to make sure that you've got a good name, right? If
Mhm.
especially if the stuff that you're putting out there is going to affect your reputation, because you've got to also be very careful with the kind of dirty laundry you're going to put out.
Sure.
Um, Now, listen, it's okay to put out some of it if there's a purpose for it, if there's a
Mhm.
message you want, that's okay. But the thing is, if it's only dirty laundry where you're going to be just venting and venting and saying, "Oh, I can't stand my husband," or this or that, um, just put it in a just private journal, or just do write a, you can set up, there's so many private journals you can set up online too. Just write that, you know what? And you know what, if there's a message that you want to bring out though, like later on when you're calmer, you can go back to it and just edit some of it and just make it less, just less negative. But if you want to bring out a message, you can always then um, publish it. You know what I mean? So, but
Yeah.
when you're really, really irritated, you're like, oh God, I don't know what to do with this. You got to just also figure out, okay, if I'm going to write something that could hurt my reputation, then maybe I should just stick to the private journal, you know? So,
That's good advice. Yeah, they
yeah,
talk about that in with writing, when you're putting it to book, it's called a healing. Is it a healing copy? Like
yeah.
it's like all the raw material. And then I
Hmm.
think that they say the real books and the edits. So if we're
Hmm.
talking about journaling and you're putting it out to the world, I love that because if the real books and the edits, you're going to take that healing copy and you're going to infiltrate it with solution and insight for people to read, because ultimately you're writing, if you're writing for the public, you're writing to serve them and to give them something that they can take away so
Yeah,
that they can
yeah,
make a positive change in their life. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah, it
And
makes sense.
and it's okay. The thing is, you just got to find that happy medium. It's okay to dish a little bit of dirty laundry if people are going to relate to it. You just got to make sure that it's not going to make you look bad. And that's why it's good to just put in a private journal. And later on, it's like, well,
Sure.
you know what? Maybe there's something that someone can take away. So you can edit down the real hardcore stuff and
Hmm.
just write a softer version of it as part of the copy. But then you can come up with this is how I deal with it. Then, that's okay. So it's good to just document everything. And if there's
Hmm.
something that isn't so bad, you can just write about it, especially if there's something that people can take away from it. And let me tell you, medium.com has been just it's been my that's been my coping mechanism. It really has
Hmm.
been. So it's a good, I'd say, transfer if you want to call it that,
Sure.
Hmm.
Sure.
Hmm.
What about health wise? You were talked about physically when you were at your highest weight, how
Oh,
difficult it was. So what's the
oh
positive
gosh.
changes that have happened?
Oh my goodness. I can Oh wow, I've got so much energy. It's amazing. I don't get winded anymore. I can run up the stairs and not get winded at all. My back doesn't really hurt anymore. My knees don't hurt so much, but I still get a little bit of pain in my knees only because of how much pressure I used to have. Because the thing is, you're still going to end up feeling some of the effects from having a high weight, even if you're not such a high weight. It's just,
Hmm.
unfortunately, there's some damage there, and there's very little that can be done unless you go for like physical therapy, which it's not so bad to the point that I need to do that. You just feel more comfortable and more confident, and you don't have to worry about getting seatbelt extenders, like none of that. You don't have
Yeah.
to worry about
Hmm.
people staring at you because they don't. Um, you also don't have to worry if you say go on a plane, you're not going to worry about not fitting in the seat. Nope.
Sure.
Mm-mm. That's all. I mean, that's the thing. That's the thing. And I got to tell you, the fat acceptance movement really angers me. It really, really does, because they do promote obesity, and I'm sorry to say it, they do, and they get so defensive about that, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. Hmm.
You talk about, yeah, that's interesting that, and you can, of course, having been on both sides, have a strong opinion about that,
Hmm.
rightly so. And I wanted to talk about something you had mentioned earlier, echoism,
Hmm.
as a contrast and opposition to narcissism.
Hmm.
I think that's really interesting. And I'm wondering if the confidence increase with your better relationship with food and wellness has increased your confidence, and how did that affect your people pleasing?
Oh, you know what? The thing is, it's interesting because after my son left, over time,
Hmm.
the echoism was shedding. I was starting to set boundaries. I was starting to put myself first. I was starting to say no. And let me tell you, it has helped a lot. It's not like one of those times where I just woke up one day and said, "Oh, I'm not going to be a people pleaser anymore." No, it doesn't. It's a very slow, gradual process that you may not even realize that happens until you look back and say, "Wow, oh my goodness." I mean, here's the other thing too, is that have no problem with asking for help if I need it. I used to
Very good.
not because I thought it was a burden, right? But
Hmm.
yeah, it does help you. I think it all works together. It does help you. You put yourself first. You have boundaries, but the thing is, you have to find a balance with that too, because there were times when I've noticed I've got a little selfish at times, and that's really not a that's not a good thing. So what you need to do is sort of dial back a bit, say, okay, maybe I should learn to make compromises, choose my battles, etc. Is the key is as long as it's not crossing your boundary, then sometimes you just got to give a bit
Hmm.
and make compromises. So that's sort of a job in itself too, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. Being a lot of listeners are recovering from addictions, and I think people pleasing, whatever. There's always something that they characterize themselves with, their personality, that
Yes.
once they are starting to get well, they're able to address that.
Mhm.
And even being a mom, you're a mom, and there's a lot of moms struggle with balance, putting
Yes.
their kids first. Like you had said earlier, you would do anything for your children. And I
Yeah.
think as moms, we too do that as well. Like we put them first because we want them to go and be and do. Meanwhile, putting ourselves last and then not showing up as well. Like I know energy wise, that was a big
Mhm.
thing for me in 2019 when I lost weight. That was the first thing that I noticed, and the best thing. It was like the energy was back. It wasn't about the weight or what
Mm.
I had
Mhm.
looked like then. It
Mhm.
was about the fact that I wasn't getting like slammed down at 4 p.m. and not being able to move because I was
Mhm.
making poor choices. I was
Mhm.
exhausted. And in
Yeah.
that way, I could better be there for my kids. So I too can relate with that then.
Mhm.
That was then. This is now. Things have changed a lot. I'd love to
Mhm.
get back there. But it's certainly something that I experienced and felt that will help me be motivated to get there again.
Right, right. Yeah, absolutely. I believe that. It's gonna ebb and flow. It really
Sure.
will. And it's hard to find, it's always hard to find that balance. Um, it's even now I'm helping my daughter. She's just getting into adulthood. She's finished school and all that. I'm helping her start her business, so I'm finding myself a little bit tired, and I'm like, okay, hang on. I realize I got to help hold her hand, but she's got to do things on her own. So I said, look, her name's Stephanie. Look, Stephanie, you got to. I understand this is all new to you because she's anxious, she's shy, she's introverted. But I said, please, you've got to make an effort. I can't do everything for you. You've got to do things yourself. And she realizes that, and she's doing it slowly. So
Mhm.
if I feel like there's a chance I could end up getting burned out again, then I catch it. And that's when I say, look, I got to put the brakes on because I got
Right.
to focus on my work. I mean, I've got a lot of stuff to do for myself, right?
Sure. Can you talk a little bit about
Mhm.
burnout and what that looks like, what that feels like, and what you can do about it? Because I think that overachieving, all of those things go hand in hand with the personalities of people who have addictions and such.
Yeah.
They're as successful or as unsuccessful as they may have come in the height of their addiction. When they put it down, they're just super achievers, right? So
Yeah.
what does burnout look like, and how can
Well,
you avoid it?
yeah, well, I think it may be different for everybody, but the common theme with burnout is just feeling depleted and you don't feel like you can do anything. You have no excitement anymore. You just have no energy and you are just feeling that you just don't have anything more to give. You're beyond exhausted and you're depleted and you know what? You're feeling resentful that you got to do these things
Resentful,
for
yes,
others. Well,
I
yeah.
think
hmm Oh, yeah.
that's an indication.
Yeah, if you're feeling resentful and you're just feeling like you don't care, then that's burnout. What ends up happening is it can turn into compassion fatigue, and that's when it can get very dangerous, right?
Mhm.
It can get
Mhm.
very dangerous. It's like it gets to the point where you just don't give a crap about the care recipient because you're apathetic. You're also apathetic. And
Sure.
that's what I was, experiencing, and also very, very depressed. I also have depression too, and complex PTSD from all
Mhm.
that. And you know what? That's all hidden, but it just turns very ugly. So exhaustion, apathy, resentful, you're pouring from an empty cup, and
Sure.
you know it, and that's when you need extreme respite, right?
Right.
Mhm.
Correct. Yeah. It's like putting yourself in the ICU and
Yeah, for
just
sure.
like an intensive care
Hmm.
and then, being let out to a normal bed like
Yeah,
as
yeah.
you make those. I think it's about, allowing for space. Not only does it give you I'm not just talking about space in a day,
Hmm.
not back to back to back, but because it gives you that psychological space, which I think you alluded to when you talked about being prescribed that diet drug,
Hmm.
was that it gave you that psychological space to be like, wow, okay, so I'm not eating all day, so I have this time,
Hmm.
which builds awareness, which allows you to think better and to make better choices.
Yeah, definitely. And you know what? Like I said, not everyone's going to be a candidate, and
Exactly.
I'm not
Hmm.
trying to, because again, you do have risks with it too. I've heard a lot of stories about, people having very bad reactions to it, but I think maybe the best thing to do is you got to talk to a professional that can help you and
100%.
work with you. I mean, there may be other safer tools. You'd have to
Hmm.
explore that, like, because I'm all for using a tool if it can help you. I mean, think about it. If you can't see that well, you got to wear glasses. You know what I mean? That's a tool.
Right.
And yeah, I see
Hmm.
this as the same thing. It's not a magic bullet, it's a tool, but it really does change so much. It reduces your appetite, changes your outlook on food and your relationship with food, and you got to still work with it. Doesn't mean that the old habits won't come back, because they
Hmm.
certainly can, but then you become more mindful. But I also want to mention too, and this is um, not it's understandable too, but you can end up dealing with a lot of fear, especially if you're placed in a place where there's a lot of food and stuff like buffets. You feel fearful, very fearful,
Sure.
because last year my daughter wanted to go to a Chinese buffet and for her birthday, and it was her birthday, right? I had to go along with it, and I was terrified. I was
Hmm.
terrified, like, oh my
Hmm.
goodness, what am I going to do there? But you know what? I slayed it.
Yeah.
I slayed it. I stayed away from the fried stuff. I just stuck with seafood and vegetables, and I just had some soup. I did really well. I'm like,
It's
wow.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. It's the same with we live in a world where food is
Hmm.
everywhere, right? So we
Yeah.
have to do those first times. Same
Hmm.
with drinking. It's a drinking world.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. We do those first weddings, we do those first Christmases. We get
Yeah.
through that and we say, "Wow, that was a complete success." And it was way easier than I thought. But the fear is real and it is
Yeah.
there. And
Yeah.
I think it's important and for listeners who are just maybe starting out,
Hmm.
you have to walk through that so that
Yeah.
you know you can. And the next time you go, and you can be anywhere, you can be and go and do anything just like anybody else, with limitations. They
Yeah.
say like have an exit strategy.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I go into a bar in New York, I go to the bar and I grab a water and I have it in my hand all the time because
Hmm.
I don't want to put
Hmm.
that down and pick something else up
No, no.
mistakenly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody asked me about anything and I'm free to have my night. It's just
Yeah.
simple tools. Yeah.
There's very simple tools, and one simple tool for me that I've been utilizing, and it does work, is focusing on protein. Protein is so key because you're going to eat less of it. It fills you up even more, and you have less of a desire to crave for sugar. I really
Yeah.
don't eat much sugar, and my blood sugar levels are amazing right now. So, and I want to
Excellent.
keep it that way. Yeah, I mean, the Ozempic helps, but also losing weight
So
and
what are
just
your
eating
what are your
better.
go-to suggestions for protein? So if somebody's predominantly eating sugar all the time and carbohydrates and
Hmm.
bread,
Hmm.
and what are some
Yeah.
good protein sources that they can alternate with?
Okay. Okay, so I just want to just flat out say that I'm not vegetarian or vegan. I do eat meat. So
Mhm.
that's I'll just give that disclaimer out there. But if you are vegetarian or vegan, that's something also to look into because I'm not 100% sure. But I do eat a lot of fish. I eat chicken. I eat lean beef, and
Mhm.
I eat a lot of eggs. And nuts also are good in moderation because they're very high calorie, but they do fill you up.
Mhm.
Peanut butter in moderation, like everything in moderation. And also you really it's better to stick with complex like whole grain
Yeah, come
um breads and stuff and crackers, whole grains. Whole grains are very good, very low glycemic. It has low glycemic index. It's a slow release of insulin and all that.
on.
And there's also some really good, there's sweets as well that are very good for, they're good. The smart sweets, for instance, are quite good because very low sugar and it's a good snack to have if you do have a bit
Mhm.
of a sweet tooth. And you know what? You still will, but look
Sure.
for low sugar, low calorie options. And,
Mhm.
you can find them on Amazon. Like Smart Sweets is a good idea. Those are like gummies. Also fruits. You know what? Like berries, especially berries, are very sweet. And apples are also good because there's a lot of fiber. Also, vegetables are important, but just stick to the ones that you like. You know what? I won't eat raw broccoli. It upsets my stomach. So if I like broccoli when it's cooked. Um, so you know what? You got to stick with the foods that you like to.
Yeah.
You
And
do.
like
So because otherwise, yeah.
naturally occurring sugars that happen within fruits.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, yeah.
fine. Say that's
All good.
great.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you got to be careful, especially if you're diabetic, but you can still have
Hmm.
it. Just because you're diabetic doesn't mean that you can't, you still need carbohydrates. You absolutely do.
Hmm.
And you know what? Once in a blue moon, it's okay to have a sweet. I mean, it's okay. If you say are going somewhere and it's a birthday and they have a delicious looking cake, have a piece. It's okay.
Right.
But
Yeah.
just eat it in moderation. And you know what? Would you do one day if you go over? Just get right back to it the next
Hmm.
day and don't feel guilty about it. Easier said than done. I totally understand that.
Sure.
But think about moderation. But the thing is, if you are a food addict and you are addicted to one type of food, stay away from it. Because you know what? I know it's easy for others to say everything in moderation, but the thing is, if you're like addicted to pasta, don't eat pasta then, because
Yeah, and
that's. Mhm,
that's so interesting to me because
mhm,
up until a couple of months ago,
mhm,
I was interviewing someone and they had said, these foods you're like abstinent from them because and I never thought of that in relation to food. I thought of that. I think that's very important for
mhm,
alcoholics to abstain entirely from alcohol. Um,
mhm, mhm,
Absolutely. That's what I do,
mhm,
100%. But I never thought of that in relation to food that would
mhm.
tip you off, like high sugar, whatever your go to is, whether it's ice cream or
Yeah.
bread or whatever it is. And when I heard that, it was like so eye opening to me. I thought, oh, you do
Mhm.
exactly that, and there's other alternatives. And that really
Absolutely.
changed it for me. Yeah. So
Hmm.
hearing you say it as well, it's just probably something that because I wasn't immersed in that whole world because I was in the other, I
Hmm.
didn't I didn't put it to food. But
Yes.
yeah, it would
Oh,
absolutely
absolutely.
work.
Well, for example, I stay 100% away from Nutella. Like I don't have any of it. Because sure, even moderation with that's fine. But the thing is, I'm even if I am on Ozempic, I could still end up finding myself eating a whole jar and just feeling awful after. So I'd
Hmm.
rather just stay away from it. I don't buy it. I just stay away from Nutella. But peanut butter doesn't do that to me. So I'm able to eat that in moderation, no problem. So you gotta focus on the foods that are, you like but aren't totally addicted to. You can have those in moderation. Like pizza, I have pizza once in a while. Nothing wrong with that. A couple of
Hmm.
slices here, small, it's fine. I mean, pasta, I have no problem with eating. I do have pasta a couple times a week. Whole wheat pasta is still a carb, but you know what? Stick
Hmm.
to your protein. Like salmon, I eat a lot of salmon. You eat the protein first, and then you have the a carb after because that does slow down. That does slow it down. The release, right? It does slow it down. There is there is science behind that. I've studied that enough, and I've heard about it enough by professionals that if you eat your proteins and fiber first and then have your carbs after, you don't have a blood sugar spike at all, even if you have
Okay, that's
simple
good
carbs.
advice. Yeah,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have
Hmm.
known that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you
Yeah.
talked about complex carbohydrates, which
Hmm.
my mother has been a diabetic educator for many, many years, and she's also a nutritionist, and she talks a lot about that.
Hmm.
So, can you tell us the difference, or do you know the difference? And could you just share that
Yeah.
quickly?
Well, it's actually pretty
Just a
easy.
basic.
The white flour stuff is very
Mhm.
high glycemic, and gonna cause your blood sugar to spike. The whole grains is low glycemic, so it'll be a slow energy release, so it won't spike your blood sugar. It's a slow, slow, slow release, so it's better to stick with that. But you know what? If you absolutely love, say, a wrap and it's a white wrap, you can still have it, but make sure you have your protein and fiber with it because that'll still slow it down. And that's because I absolutely love these white wraps that I have for lunch, but I have egg, avocado. Avocado is actually very good. And I put a little bit of cheese. It's about, I'd say 400 or 500 calories, but you know what? It's very, very healthy calories.
Mhm.
It's very healthy. So, I mean, I do stick to around 1700 a day because I am losing on that. I'm probably going to end up having to go a little lower soon because it's starting to slow. Um, but yeah, that's the thing. You stick with proteins and healthy fats. Healthy fats.
Mhm.
Monounsaturates are good, like omega-3s. You do need fats to function for your hormones. It's so necessary for your brain. You need it. You just have to have the right fats, right? So
Mhm.
salmon, just fish. Nuts also have good fats. Avocado has good fats. So really, that's what it is. You got to focus on your proteins, getting enough fiber, getting good fats. Also, yeah, calorie. You got to know basically what your maintenance is if you want to maintain.
Sure.
If you want to lose, you just go around 300 to 500 below your maintenance level. And there are easy ways to calculate that, or you can always talk to a dietitian because you know what? Some of these tools may not be 100% accurate. Um, everyone says, oh, well, you got to slap yourself on 1200 calories. Like, oh, absolutely not.
Mhm.
No, no,
Yeah,
no,
and
no.
I want
Hmm.
to talk about that for a quick moment is
Hmm.
because I think a lot of people say, "Hey, I want to lose this," but
Hmm.
they don't go that far. And
No.
I'm going to do a comparison like when I was writing my rough draft of my book, I
Hmm.
never went as far as to say, "Well, what genre is it? How many words usually go in this genre?" And then calculate out and then say, "Hey, by this deadline, I'd like to have this completed." So backtrack and then how many days do I need to do how many words to accomplish that goal? And when I did that calculation, it was just math. It happened. And
Hmm.
I think it can be related to this. If you
Yeah.
say, hey, I would like to achieve this by this time,
Hmm.
I'd have to have this caloric intake, not to weigh and do all that, but
Hmm.
just to have this caloric intake and not to exceed that
Hmm.
on a daily basis, give or take, have, some freedom there.
Yeah.
And I think the end result will come a lot quicker and you'll have more motivation and momentum. I know that
Yeah.
it worked in
Yeah.
that way. Yeah.
Well, that's true. I mean, the thing is, you got to be very, very careful, not to go too under because that can mess your metabolism up a lot.
Mhm.
Like I said, it was probably very stupid of me just to slap myself on 1500 calories when I was probably consuming 4 to 5,000 a day. That was probably stupid. I should have really gone to a dietitian. They probably would have said start at 2500, then scale down because I would have lost initially on that for sure, right? Even though
Sure.
that's above maintenance for women, especially. But if you are eating in an extreme surplus like that, it's enough of a deficit to start getting you going in a healthy way. So
Sure.
honestly, the best thing to do is to work with someone professional. And
A professional.
I don't know. Yeah, and honestly, I even looked at bariatric surgery, but I got terrified when I heard about what they do. I'm like, oh no, no. And the cost of it, like I know insurance can cover some of it, but I got scared off. I got absolutely
Sure.
scared off, and I think it's quite drastic what they do. They put you on a liquid diet of very few calories a day. And I don't know, I personally just got very scared off when I
Sure.
heard about it. So, mhm.
Yeah, and to also, I love that you said you had an energy intake. Everything's to focus on not just the caloric intake, but to focus on how you're feeling because you talked about
Mm,
emotional eating. So when you have an uptick in like feeling good, say, hey, wow, this feels good. It's because I didn't do that. And then,
mm,
if you have energy and you say, well, I'm just going to go down the street. I'm just going to go for a walk, see how I feel when I get back. And if that's a good feeling, to remember that and
hmm.
to say the next day, say, wow, I felt good doing that. So I'm going to do that again. When you make better
Yeah.
choices, that do good, feel good, you make a good choice for yourself, you start to gain that confidence back, and want to head back out into the world when sometimes things like this keep us so isolated and by ourselves. So those are a lot of the, some positives of that I can hear happen to you.
Yeah, and I also want to mention a couple of things. There's you talk about non-scale victories, right?
Hmm.
Tying your shoes. It's like, oh my goodness, I don't have to
Wow.
struggle with. I can just bend down and tie my shoes. Cutting your toenails.
Right. Oh my
And it's
goodness.
so
Yeah.
funny because I remember when I lost all that weight back in 2018, when I cut my toenails, I just totally had forgotten how I struggled. I just did it naturally. Like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm
Hmm.
doing this, you know? So it's there's just all those small wins add up too.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, I really appreciate you having the courage to come on here and talk about, so many of my guests. It's just incredible that they have the courage to come here, talk about things they do behind closed doors because they've found ways out and they're just helping so many people. I just really appreciate that. Do you have
Yeah.
anything you'd like to add to someone who is just struggling getting started?
Yeah, so I'd say the first thing to do is join a support group. There's lots of support groups on Facebook, like lots of support groups. Just look at some of the groups that have a lot of interaction. You don't want to join an old group that had only one post within the last month, right? So when you look for support, weight loss, or even emotional eating, emotional eating support. There's so many groups on Facebook. I would say do that and also get yourself a professional if you're able to afford one. I'm sure there's some really good online tools. There's online coaches that can help you. And you know what? Don't be afraid to look into tools. Now, again, I'm not touting Monjaro or Ozempic or any of those, but there may be some other safer tools that you can use that don't depend on whether you're diabetic or not. So look into that, ask questions. I'm talking about stuff that really works. Forget about the ones who are trying to advertise their scams, because there's so much of it out there. Just be careful with that. But
Sure.
look into tools that might be able to help you as well if you really feel you need one, because sometimes you need it and you may have to stay on. I'm probably gonna have to stay on this because of
Hmm.
my diabetes as well,
Sure.
right? But I would say look into tools if you feel you need it. Work with a professional if you're able to afford it. But again, there's so many apps online that can help, support groups. And this way, if you're with those who are supporting you, then you will have an easier time working through it. And you'll find your own healthy coping mechanisms, like writing for me, but it might be art for you, it might be music for you, it might be something else. So I would say do that.
Yeah, there's excellent. I think that's really excellent as far as suggestions. I love the
Mhm.
artistic
Yeah.
outlets. I love that you're writing so much. And could you let listeners know where they could find you if they wanted to connect?
Oh, yes, I'm on so many places. I'm also a tarot reader too, and tarot is a great way for me to self-reflect too.
Mhm.
But I understand that's not for everyone, but I'm on miriamreadstarot.com. I'm also on Instagram, Miriam Reads Tarot. I'm on Substack, Miriam Reads Tarot. And if you want to look me up on LinkedIn, Miriam Rachel. And also, I'm on Medium because that's been my outlet. Ms. Mir, MSMIR, Mir, medium.com. That's where I am on Medium if you're on there too. So that's basically where I am.
Okay, thank you so much. That's msmir.medium.com.
Yeah,
I'm also going to put Miriam Rachel's information in the show notes so that if anyone wanted to connect, they could do that. And I
that's great.
appreciate so much you coming on and sharing not only all your struggles, but all the victories. I think there's so much to take away, putting down harmful habits, making positive change in your life. People with food addictions, they can completely relate. This has been a really incredible conversation. I'm so grateful that you came on to share today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm really glad to share it. And again, I want to really make it clear I'm not a professional, I'm not an expert. I'm just sharing based on my experiences. So
Thank you so much for being here.
thank you as well.
Thank you for tuning into the Sober Living Stories podcast. If you have been inspired, consider subscribing and sharing with anyone who could use hope in their lives. Remember to stay tuned for more inspiring stories in the episodes to come. To view our featured author of the month or to become a guest yourself, visit www.jessicastepanovic.com.